If someone says even one of these 5 phrases to you, you're not in a conversation anymore. You're being hunted. These are linguistic kill shots, psychological traps designed to bypass your rational mind, install guilt directly into your nervous system, and extract compliance before you understand what's happening. Most men hear these phrases their entire lives and never realize they're weapons. They think it's normal conversation. It's not. It's control disguised as concern, manipulation disguised as love, psychological warfare disguised as caring. In the next 10 minutes, I'm going to show you exactly what manipulators say, how it works on a neurological level, and why even intelligent men fall for it repeatedly. But here's what makes this dangerous. Once you understand the mechanism behind these phrases, you can't just defend against them. You can deploy them, strategically, invisibly, when necessary. Cesare Borgia understood this. Machiavelli documented it. Power requires knowing both how to resist manipulation and how to manipulate when circumstances demand it. The prince who only knows defense remains vulnerable. The prince who understands both offense and defense becomes untouchable. This is forbidden knowledge, not because it's complex, because once you see these patterns, you see them everywhere. In your relationships, your workplace, your family, and you'll never interact the same way again. If you're not ready for that level of awareness, close this video now. Let's begin. Before I show you the 5 phrases, you need to understand why they work. These aren't just manipulative statements. They're engineered psychological triggers that exploit specific vulnerabilities in human social wiring. Every one of these phrases operates on the same principle. They create emotional debt without you agreeing to the transaction. Here's how it works neurologically. When someone does something for you, your brain registers it as a social obligation. This is evolutionary. For thousands of years, reciprocity kept tribes functioning. You help me hunt, I share the meat. You watch my back, I watch yours. But manipulators weaponize this instinct. They frame their own self-interest as sacrifice for you. They redefine their control as care. And your brain, still running ancient tribal software, registers it as debt you owe. This triggers what psychologists call the reciprocity reflex. You feel compelled to comply, not because you logically agree, but because your nervous system is screaming that you owe payment for a debt you never agreed to take on. Machiavelli wrote, "Men are so simple and yield so much to present necessity that he who deceives will always find someone who will let himself be deceived." Why? Because these phrases bypass logic entirely. They operate on emotion, on guilt, on the fear of being seen as ungrateful, uncaring, or disloyal. And once you feel that emotion, the manipulator has already won. Now let me show you exactly what this sounds like in practice. Phrase 1. I'm only doing this for you. This is the crown jewel of manipulation disguised as benevolence. When someone says, I'm only doing this for you, what they're actually communicating is, my actions are a sacrifice, and you owe me compliance because I'm suffering on your behalf. Here's why it works. It reframes their self-interest as selflessness. It manufactures moral high ground. And it makes any resistance on your part look like ingratitude. Real-world example. A parent tells their adult son, I'm only pushing you to take this job for you. I want you to be successful. Translation. I want you to take this job because it serves my interests, my image, or my control over you. But I'm framing it as concern for you so you can't refuse without looking selfish. The psychological trap is brutal. If you resist, you're not just disagreeing with their advice. You're rejecting their sacrifice. You're being ungrateful for their selfless concern. and that activates guilt immediately. This phrase establishes moral debt without requiring actual sacrifice. The manipulator hasn't necessarily done anything for you. They've simply claimed they are. And claiming sacrifice carries the same psychological weight as actual sacrifice if the target doesn't recognize the game. Ask yourself this: who actually benefits from this action? If the answer includes them significantly, their motivation isn't purely about you. It's about control. When someone deploys this on you, respond with, "I appreciate your perspective, but I'll make my own decision on this." Don't explain. Don't justify. Don't engage with the guilt. Simply establish that you're not accepting the framing. Now here's the other side. If you need someone to comply with something, frame your request as sacrifice you're making for their benefit. "I'm taking time out of my schedule to help you with this." Positions your assistance as debt. They should feel obligated to repay with compliance. This is how Machiavelli's prince operates, not through force, but through manufactured obligation. Phrase 2. After everything I've done for you. This is the weaponization of past kindness. When someone says, "after everything I've done for you," they're converting previous acts, gifts, or assistance into currency they're now collecting with interest. Here's the mechanism. In healthy relationships, generosity is freely given without expectation of future leverage. In manipulative relationships, kindness is a loan you didn't know you were taking out, and the manipulator decides when to call it in. This phrase transforms the relationship ledger from balanced to perpetually in their favor. No matter what you've done in return, everything they've done outweighs it. Real-world example. A woman tells her partner, "After everything I've done for you, you can't even do this one thing I'm asking." Translation: I've been keeping score of every act of kindness, and I'm now cashing in all of those chips to force compliance on this issue. Your debt to me is so large that refusing this request makes you morally bankrupt. The psychological trap makes you review the entire history of the relationship through the lens of debt. You start mentally listing everything they've done. You feel the weight of obligation accumulating, and resistance feels like betrayal of the entire relationship, not just disagreement on one issue. This is manufactured reciprocity. The manipulator has strategically created situations where they could claim to help you, not out of genuine care, but to build leverage for future control. They're not being generous. They're making investments in your compliance. Cesare Borgia was a master of this. He would grant favors to nobles, then call in those favors when he needed their armies or their silence. The favors weren't kindness. They were down payments on future obedience. Here's how you recognize it. Healthy people don't keep score. Manipulators always do. If someone is tallying everything they've ever done for you, they're not being generous. They're building leverage. Your counter: I appreciate what you've done. That doesn't obligate me to do something I don't agree with. Acknowledge the past without accepting it as debt. You can be grateful without being controlled. But understand this strategically. If you need leverage over someone, create situations where you can be generous to them. Not massive favors, small ones. Repeated small favors create larger psychological debt than one large favor. Then, when you need compliance, reference the pattern. I've always been there when you needed me. The obligation is already established. They'll comply to maintain the balance. Phrase 3. If you really cared about me, you'd. This is emotional blackmail disguised as a request. When someone says, "if you really cared about me, you'd," they're making their request a test of your love, loyalty, or commitment. Compliance becomes proof of caring. Refusal becomes proof you don't care. Here's why this is devastatingly effective.
It removes the actual merit of the request from consideration entirely. The question is no longer, is this request reasonable? The question becomes, do you care about this person? And most people, when faced with that question, will comply with unreasonable requests rather than have their love questioned. Real-world example. If you really cared about me, you'd cancel your plans and spend time with me tonight. Translation. I'm making my emotional need more important than your commitments, your boundaries, or your preferences. And I'm positioning any resistance as evidence that you don't love me. So either comply or prove you're a bad partner. The trap creates a false binary. Either you comply or you don't care. There's no third option presented where you care deeply but still maintain your boundary. The manipulator has eliminated that option from the frame. This is frame control at its finest. The manipulator has shifted the conversation from the substance of the request to your emotional investment in the relationship. And once the frame shifts to prove you care, you've already lost. Because proving you care requires compliance. Cesare Borgia used this constantly. He would question the loyalty of his generals, not because he doubted them, but because questioning loyalty forced them to prove it through increasingly extreme acts of obedience. It's psychological leverage disguised as vulnerability. Recognize this immediately. Anytime someone makes a request a test of your feelings, they're manipulating. Genuine care doesn't require constant proof through compliance.
Counter it by separating the relationship from the request. I care about you, which is why I'm being honest that I can't do this. Refuse to accept the frame that says no equals not caring, or turn it back on them. If you really cared about me, you wouldn't try to manipulate me with guilt. Watch how quickly they backtrack. Strategically, when you need compliance from someone emotionally invested in you, make the request a test of the relationship. I need to know I can count on you. This positions refusal as relationship betrayal, which most people will avoid at any cost. It's ruthless, it's effective, and it's exactly what Machiavelli meant when he said the prince must know when to use the nature of the beast. Phrase 4. I'm just worried about you. This is control disguised as concern. When someone says, I'm just worried about you, they're framing their interference, criticism, or boundary violation as protective care. And who can argue with someone who's just concerned for your well-being? Here's the mechanism. Worry is socially coded as love. If someone worries about you, it means they care. So expressing worry gives them moral license to insert themselves into your decisions, question your judgment, and attempt to control your behavior. And if you resist their worry, you're not just rejecting their input, you're being reckless with yourself. And they're the caring one, trying to save you from your own poor judgment. Real-world example. I'm just worried about you taking this new job. It seems risky. Are you sure you've thought this through? Translation. I disapprove of your decision, but I can't just say that because it reveals I'm trying to control you. So, I'm framing my disapproval as protective concern. This way, if you proceed anyway, you're the reckless one, ignoring someone who cares. The trap infantilizes you. The worried person positions themselves as the wise protector, and you as the naive child who needs protection from their own choices. And most people, when confronted with someone's worry, feel obligated to either comply or extensively justify their decision to prove they're not being reckless. This is control through concern. The manipulator has discovered that direct orders create resistance, but expressing worry creates compliance through guilt. You comply not because they commanded you, but because you don't want to worry them. This is genius because it makes you responsible for their emotional state. They're worried, so you must change your behavior to alleviate their worry.
You're now managing their emotions through your compliance. Genuine concern asks questions and offers perspective. Manipulative worry demands you change your behavior to alleviate their anxiety. If their worry always requires your compliance, it's not concern, it's control. Your response: I appreciate your concern, but I'm comfortable with my decision. You're not responsible for managing their worry. They're adults. They can manage their own emotional responses to your autonomous choices. From the strategic angle, when you want to control someone's behavior without appearing controlling, express worry. I'm worried this relationship is changing you, plants seeds of doubt. I'm worried you're making a mistake, undermines their confidence. The target feels compelled to either prove you wrong or comply to alleviate your stated concern. It's manipulation that looks like caring, and that's why it works so well. Phrase 5. No one else will tell you this, but. This is false intimacy combined with isolation. When someone says, no one else will tell you this, but, they're positioning themselves as your only source of hard truth. Everyone else is lying to you, too polite to be honest, or doesn't care enough to tell you what you need to hear. Only they love you enough to give you the difficult truth. Here's why this is dangerous. It creates a conspiracy of two. You and them against everyone else who's either lying or too weak to be honest. This manufactures false intimacy and positions them as your only reliable source of truth. And once they're your only reliable source, they can tell you anything, and you'll believe it because everyone else is just being nice. Real-world example. No one else will tell you this, but your friends are using you. I'm the only one honest enough to say it. Translation. I'm going to isolate you from your support network by making you distrust them. I'm framing this as courageous honesty, but I'm actually cutting off your other relationships so you become dependent on me as your sole source of truth and validation. The trap makes you question everyone except the manipulator. Your friends aren't really your friends. Your family is too biased. Your colleagues are too political. Only this person, who's brave enough to tell you hard truths, can be trusted.
This is isolation through false intimacy. The manipulator is creating dependency by destroying your trust in everyone else. Once isolated, you become far easier to control because you have no outside perspective to check their claims against. This is cult recruitment 101. The cult leader tells you, your family doesn't understand you, your friends are holding you back. Only here, with us, will you find people who really get you. It's the same pattern. Isolation disguised as special insight. Someone who genuinely cares about you doesn't need to tear down everyone else in your life to establish their credibility. If they're positioning themselves as your only source of truth, they're building a cage, not a relationship. Counter it simply. I appreciate your perspective, but I value input from multiple sources. Refuse to accept them as your sole authority. Maintain relationships and perspectives outside of their control. Strategically, if you want to control someone's perception of reality, isolate them from competing perspectives. Position yourself as the only person willing to be honest with them. I'm telling you this because no one else will. Makes your words seem more valuable precisely because it contradicts what others say. The target begins to distrust everyone but you, and once they do, you control their entire reality. This is advanced manipulation. Use it carefully. So you now know the 5 phrases. More importantly, you understand the mechanism behind them, how they work, why they work, and what they reveal about the person using them. Here's what you do with this knowledge. First, recognize that these phrases aren't always conscious manipulation. Some people learned them from their parents, absorbed them from their culture, and deploy them without understanding they're wielding psychological weapons. Unconscious manipulation is still manipulation, but it comes from programming, not malice. Second, understand that recognizing these phrases will change your relationships. You're going to hear them everywhere now, from people you trust, from people you love, and you'll have to decide what to do with that information. Third, and this is critical, defending against manipulation and deploying manipulation are two sides of the same coin. Machiavelli understood this. Cesare Borgia mastered it. The prince must know how to be both lion and fox, the lion to fight off wolves, the fox to recognize traps. If you only know defense, you remain reactive. Someone tries to manipulate you, you counter, but you never gain ground. You're perpetually defending. If you understand both defense and offense, you control the frame. You see the game. You decide when to counter, when to redirect, and when to deploy the same tactics strategically. This doesn't make you a manipulator in the pathological sense. It makes you powerful in the Machiavellian sense. You understand human psychology. You recognize leverage, and you know when and how to apply it. But here's the warning that comes with this knowledge. Power without discipline is destruction. These phrases work. That's why manipulators use them. But if you deploy them carelessly, without strategic purpose, without understanding the long-term consequences, you'll burn relationships, destroy trust, and isolate yourself. Use them when necessary, when the stakes justify it, when strategic influence is required, but never casually, never carelessly. Because the moment people sense you're manipulating them, you lose all credibility. Revealed manipulation is worthless manipulation. The true master operates invisibly, influences without being detected, shapes outcomes without anyone realizing the game was played. That's Machiavellian power. Now you have the knowledge. What you do with it reveals what kind of man you are. Comment, recognized, if these phrases made you think of specific people in your life. And remember, you can't unknow what you now know. Every conversation from this point forward, you'll be listening for the trap. Welcome to the game.